of owning a cafe and other heroic deeds by Beware the Chistero. Chapter 46, Talks, Part 1. Scampering into the cat enclosure, Izuku wandered towards two of the cube stools, many cats following in his wake. He wasn't pensive per se, but Kachan didn't normally ask to talk to him when everyone else was around, and he really truly hoped that he'd not done anything wrong or upset him again in some way. His former, still, best friend wasn't far behind him, his face determined as he took the other seat, whilst Buck Skatsugo and Red Riot boisterously bounded around his bare feet before Kiro, and Reijin all lolloped over to join in the greeting. Hotaru was watching the display from where he'd curled into Homura, who was similarly sleeping into Hakue's side along with Gigi, whilst Hime somehow wrapped around them all in the back corner atop one of the bigger beanbags. "Taku," the crimson-eyed child began, his lips wobbling a little as they regarded each other. I want to say that I'm really sorry for, well, all of the ways I've been meaning you since. He broke off, his small hands bunching into fists as he struggled to get his words out. Wait, it was wrong for me to hurt you and make you feel bad when you were already feeling bad, and I didn't know what to do. I was mad at you for breaking our promise to be heroes together, he continued. What? And that was so stupid and selfish of me, you know? And I was even more stupid to think that you needed a quirk, because you're amazing with that one. Anyway, he stated, and you are amazing, and you can be a doctor and a hero, you could be anything, okay? He'd sat, watched the other boy, listened, and taken everything in. Was he dreaming? Could the things he wished for fervently since that terrible, awful day at the doctor's office really have come true? Kachan? He breathed. Nodding, the boy got up, and instead of stomping away or yelling at him for being stupid or shoving him, the explosion quirk user held out his hand to him. Dude, will you accept my apology, Izuku? Whoa! He'd searched it up without thinking, his eyes rippled with some of the happiest tears he'd ever experienced. His arms enfolding the boy he'd longed to reconnect with, had prayed would one to accept him and want to rebuild the friendship they'd nearly lost through their shared regret, anger, and confusion. Of course, I forgive you! Gachan, you're so amazing too, and I'm so glad that you don't hate me! He sniffled, his arms tightening their hold on the slightly taller boy hugged him back. I never hated you, Deku, he breathed quietly. I'm sorry that you ever thought that I did, he told him softly. Shonin was right. I couldn't stop thinking about how you didn't have and that was dumb of me. I should have never let my anger make you feel bad, he admitted. I should have supported you like you've always supported me. You're the kind of person I want to be, you know? Nodding into the boy's shoulder, they continued to hug for a few more minutes before slowly pulling away. I've had lots of really great presents today, he told him. Their eyes locking, their heads still holding on to each other. But you're giving me the best present I could ever ask for, Kachan, he offered, their grip on trembling fingers tightening. Thank you for accepting me and for being my friend, he said firmly. We're still gonna be heroes together, okay? The rest of Izuku's birthday was, just as he'd predicted, wonderful, and the tot had been inundated with All Might-themed gifts, which the big lug himself had signed with a winning smile and good humor. Oh yes, the soon-to-be true 7-year-old had everything, including a limited edition poster that Night-Eye had provided, alongside the 24-month subscription to the #1's official social media platform, which would give him and his friends tickets to special events and, behind-the-scenes, access at his shows, charity events, and TV interviews. God, that sounded like a lot of work, didn't it? Then the cake and food demolished. By 1600, the kids were tuckered out from all of the excitement and collected by their parents. Izuku's face had flushed bright pink when Ochako Etsuyo had kissed his cheeks before leaving. Inko, alongside Mitsuki, however, had taken Hitoshi and their sons back to the Midoriya's apartment. They were all eager to set up the emerald-haired child's online subscription, and he'd waved them off with hugs before going about tidying his workspace. The teens and pros had helped him with the cleanup. He had a feeling he'd still be finding glitter a week from now. And then similarly made their way either home or to their agencies, because heroing was a 24/7 thing, wasn't it? Whilst Tomura and Dabi had settled into the cat enclosure. He'd nipped in for a few cuddles every so often, because what was the point of having a cat cafe if you couldn't enjoy your feline family members? Filled their water dishes and emptied the litter trays, and then headed out to recheck the eatery. They'd been very lucky that Tomoko specialized in training. The kittens rarely had any accidents now. Seeing that it was spotless, or at least up to his exacting standards, he'd finished off his Monday food prep work, had a quick shower, and changed into his workout clothes before, after checking on the teens, they were taking selfies with the cats, he made his way down to the yoga studios to set up for his adult classes. What he hadn't expected was to find Nezu decked out in a shirt and tie, casually waiting for him there.
"Hi,"
he greeted.
"Would you like to join the first group, or—"
"Ah, I'm so glad you've brought up the topic of joining something."
The older man chuckled, a fierce glint in his eye.
"I've still not given up on getting you a pro license, you know."
Working with his adults under the scrutiny of the educational professional had been awkward, because regardless of his friendly demeanor and how he just sat quietly on a chair at the corner of the room sipping from a flask of tea he'd magicked up from somewhere. Sure, he hadn't minded, and he certainly wouldn't have asked him to leave, unless any of his students, when asked, had not wanted to have an audience, but how many other ways could he find to say, "No thanks"? It's not that he wasn't flattered, and yes, there were benefits to holding a pro hero accreditation, but as wonderful as the local pros were, as genuine was All Might and Night Eye were, and as much as he adored the Golden Eye man's sidekicks or helped his tots to reach that ambition, he wasn't sure really if his original impressions of the profession had been changed. At nighttime, he and his boys would sit together and watch TV for an hour or so, and at least once every evening, the shows they were watching abruptly cut off to bring some kind of breaking news. Breaking news, which normally involved some posing, caped, masked person playing up for the cameras while a busted-up building and busted-up bad guys in the background, whilst the police, genuinely struggling to get the evildoers into paddy wagons, struggled on. Similarly, the fire crews, paramedics, and civilians didn't so much as get a look in. Their ability to do their jobs or live their lives. Mothers holding infants were barred from their homes. People with physical difficulties were pushed out of the way alongside older people by throngs of fans. And sure, theoretically, he knew that holding a license wouldn't mean that he'd have to join an agency and cover shifts. However, his mind just couldn't get beyond the showboating at the heart of hero culture. He didn't want to contribute to that world, and even though he'd nurtured and harbored a considerable amount of patience over his 21 years of life, he knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that he'd end up butting heads with someone. Or throwing hands, besides. There were too many arrogant pricks in that oversaturated society for his liking, and even though he now knew personally that good people who did the job for the right reasons milled around amongst them, he couldn't get past the hypocrisy. He couldn't get past that heroes would sometimes go looking for trouble just to boost their fame, approval ratings, or income. He'd always wondered about the old adage, as long as there's evil, good will rise up against it, because what was evil? Who made that distinction? Some people would call the route that Kimiko had taken to provide for her child as evil, wrong, or disgusting. Some people would look down at and arrest a thief for stealing food to feed themselves when they were starving. Some people demonized and called a person evil just because of what they looked like or what their quirk did, and it was their cruel words and bias which ostracized, dehumanized, and broke down that person until they became what the people who disliked them feared most. A villain. A self-fulfilling prophecy. A child who, unloved by their community, burned it down to feel its warmth. Now, if Hero Society and the bigwigs behind it, their hands rubbing together greedily at the thought of merchandising, prepaid interviews, and ever-expanding profit margins, looked more closely at those kinds of people, stopped to investigate why they'd become the way they were. If all villains truly were megalomaniacs, stealing huge sums of money, destroying property, and killing, maiming, or decimating people for their own selfish, self-centered reasons, just because they could or wanted to, then maybe he would have said yes to Nezu. Maybe he would more eagerly welcome some hero students to his classes and work with them. Maybe he wouldn't feel a little worried knot form in his stomach when the tots drew their hero costumes, or Spinner cringed when the pros looked at him, or Tomra turned away from the television to scowl at his phone, or Dobby glowered at the screen, his words spiked with disdain, whilst Hitoshi looked on, his face becoming pensive. No, he couldn't enter the sphere of heroics when there was still so much wrong with it. Therefore, he'd be his own kind of hero, the kind who listened first and hit out only if warranted, the kind who could love and look after the people that most pros would have bat an eye at.
Well now, I must say that was an excellent class, Shouta-kun.
Blinking out of his thoughts, his hands reaching for his empty reusable water bottle, the cafe owner offered a little bow with a compliment before...
Nezu, why are you so determined to get me on board? I don't mean to be blunt,
he stated, his lips trying to smile.
but please, be honest. Why do you want me to be licensed as a pro?
He furthered.
Did All Might or Sir Night suggest it?
Well, they told me a great deal about you, it's true.
The other agreed as they walked out of the studio together.
However, presenting you with this opportunity was all my doing,
he explained with a grin before, after a little sigh,
those wonderful children who study at your cafe,
he said.
They have told me a great deal about you, the kind of person you are, your ideals, and, to some extent, your views on my initial profession,
he mused.
And my dear friend, that got me thinking,
he admitted.
Oh?
Yes,
he replied.
Now, I'll be the first to admit that Hero Society is one of my greatest loves. I have dedicated my life to serving others and then had the opportunity to oversee the next generation at my alma mater. But,
he sighed, their forms now wandering back toward the Noraneko,
it was refreshing to hear a different perspective and a point of view crafted by someone who, given different circumstances, could very well be a pro-hero of great acclaim. But here you are, not amongst my number. However, just look at what you're doing, he praised. And please don't misunderstand my intentions, Shouta-kun. It wouldn't be my purpose to change your mind, alter your ways, or remove you from the people you love. Something tells me that they wouldn't allow you to go anyway. He giggled. However, I would very much like to bring you on board, as you called it, so that your voice could be added to the hero assembly and heard by those who need the glamour dusted off of them,
he stated with a nod.
It is selfish of me, perhaps, but I like to spread the good that you do here farther, he reasoned. In a long-dead language called Latin, and in an ancient empire long dead from Europe, it is said that some of the greatest military leaders and rulers would often have someone following them to say, Memento Mori, you are but a man, he said. I believe, Shouta-kun, that we as pros need such a person. Someone who isn't a scathing media critic or a dissident, but someone who talks the talk and walks the walk when it comes to alternative styles of building communities and protecting those who need protection. He grinned. This is your choice, of course, and I'll not bring this topic up again for discussion. For a while, at least.
He chuckled whilst the eatery owner huffed out a laugh and ruefully rolled his eyes.
But at least think about it, ne?
Having his chauffeur, a Nomu human, looking enough to pass, should anyone take a look, pull up a few blocks away, Shigaraki pocketed his phone, checked his reflection. Yes, he made for a genteel older man with his quirk, didn't he? And exited the vehicle with not a single crease in his fine charcoal business suit. Then, after taking a cursory look around, He found his mind once again pondering why his ward, who he'd not directly contacted for a few months, had chosen to frequent such a little cat-themed eatery in the backwaters of Musutafu. He had not raised his heir to follow whims, and the dashing young man he seemed enamored with, who had been blessed with an interesting and powerful quirk, if Kurogiri's information-gathering was to be believed, aside. Outside of this place being so quiet and filled with uninteresting, rat-race-running dullards who'd not recoil at his appearance, he failed to see the appeal. However, since his business in this city was virtually concluded for the time being, he sought no harm in visiting the Noraneko Café to collect his wayward nephew in person. He'd scheduled a flight for 3 days' time, and that he was sure would give the boy long enough to make up viable excuses to Dabby before heading up north with him. Therefore, the summer sun lightly shaded by a few grey clouds, he casually walked down the street, his cerulean eyes casting to his Rolex, whilst his Italian leather shoes patted him into view of the Cat Café. It was 1650, one of the quieter times for a Monday. Apparently, salarymen and women, along with MU students, would flood the place at 1800. How very quaint. Then, one of the many powers he'd acquired over the years activating, he scanned the eatery with a hum. Tomra didn't seem to be there. He'd taken to going other places as well. However, when he clocked the burn-scarred teenager who his boy was so friendly with behind the service bar with Aizawa Shouta, he knew that his quarry would be returning there at some point. Furthermore, the red-yellow-white-themed cafe seemed relatively empty. A scattering of small children were working at a long table. A young woman was overseeing some elderly biddies in the sectioned-off Kent area, and, aside from a pregnant woman, a scattering of middle schoolers and a couple of older salarymen, he'd have the place to himself. Good. Entering the establishment, his eyes looking up to the little bell that chimed above him before he brandished his most charming smile, Shigaraki took a second to appreciate the cool, clean air before a myriad of quite frankly delicious aromas alighted across his senses. Well, well, how very unexpected.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the Noraneko Café.
The raven-haired man, tall, muscular, incredibly handsome, and more attractive still with a hint of a smile, greeted with a light bow.
What can I get you?
Dobby had never left the service area as he'd approached his guard, yet definitely appealing for him, half sauntered down to check on the young children, quirking his smile into something altogether friendly and well-meaning, which was a skill in itself, but a trait that had served him well over the years. You drew in more flies with honey and vinegar, didn't you? All for one returned the bow before looking up at the actually charming. He appreciated the rustic detail of such things. Blackboard menu overhead. My goodness, he juggled. This eatery's prices are incredibly considerate, young man, he added. The owner must be a great advocate of charity, yes?
I don't see the point in overcharging people,
the other returned, those soft lips allowing that gentle smile to broaden. How very charming.
And you're more than welcome to take a seat, sir, regardless of whatever order you'd like to make,
he further offered. Ah, how generous. Most places today are all about getting customers seen to and then shoved out of the way, aren't they? Therefore, you truly have my thanks. Cat Dad? He blinked, his eyes landing on the name tag pinned to the well-maintained apron so elegantly draped over that muscular form.
Oh, yes, that's a nickname of mine,
the other explained, those dark eyes alight with fond mirth.
I'm Aizawa Shouta, and this is my cafe,
he introduced with another polite bow. Oh, very amenable.
We don't stand on ceremonies here, and everyone is welcome,
he assured.
I've just wiped down the tables, and if you sit at that one, you'll be able to see the overhead menu easily,
he offered.
We also have a cat enclosure if you'd like to enjoy some company before or after I've served you.
My. What better company could I keep than yours, I wonder? Now I can see why Tomer spends so much time here. Oh, yes, how very rare. How truly delightful to find such courtesy in an area like this one, he thought. If not for my allergies, I would certainly entertain the idea, he mused in his lilting, harmless older man tone. I must confess that I am very surprised that my nose didn't twitch when I entered your establishment, Aizawa-kun. He grinned. You must work very hard to keep this place so clean. He praised. Oh, and this seat is very comfortable indeed. He furthered, his eyes once again appraising the chalked menu as opposed to the laminated one available on the table he'd rested his hands on. Now, let's see. I would like a flat white coffee and... My, fruit pies? Well, I've not enjoyed such a treat since I was last in America. I'll have a slice of the cherry a la mode, please, he asked. Of course, the man, quirkless Kurogiri had thought. As a martial arts instructor, most of his files were sealed since his services had been acquired by the police force, and outwardly he looked like a normal man, and there was no information to the contrary. People with good quirks didn't usually build such skills. I'll bring them to your table shortly, he added before turning to manipulate an ancient yet gleaming, clearly lovingly maintained coffee machine. Italian? Would wonders never cease? Once set, he quickly walked through a fire door to no doubt serve up the dessert and ice cream. Humming, his deceptively powerful form leading into the padded chair, Shigaraki continued to lazily observe his surroundings. This cafe was perhaps one of the most homely and welcoming places he'd visited in a long time. Carefully painted walls were adorned with cat photos, information posters, and, well, he wasn't above appreciating such simple domestic things, but they didn't usually inhabit professional settings. Framed pieces of art and essays no doubt created by the gaggle of quietly chatting, writing children behind him. The color scheme, which should have been garish, was actually thoughtfully and tastefully done. The paw prints upon the window frames, the glittering linoleum, and even the dotting of lush herb plants on what he assumed to be a service hatch next to him, fragrant, definitely well watered, all worked to create a pleasant atmosphere. He'd even found himself nodding along to the quiet, soft jazz he could hear. From a speaker system he'd spied before raising a brow at a large fairy light board sign displaying a connections and contacts header with handwritten notes offering services of all kinds. Furthermore, the red and yellow parasols outside, though the tables were empty for the time being, made him oddly nostalgic for Europe, a great place to do business, and as the scent of freshly ground expensive coffee beans washed over his senses, he found himself actually relaxing. Well. Regarding the generous slice of pie and the rich, creamy dollop of vanilla slowly melting next to it, Shigaraki sipped his coffee, rich, smooth, and fragrant, with a sigh before using the bamboo, how very ethical, dessert fork provided to carve out a mouthful of the glistening crimson fruit and short, buttery pastry to it. Dear God! Aizawa-kun, he said with a blink. May I ask which supplier you use? He asked, because it wouldn't be beyond a phone call to arrange for this fare to be supplied to him on demand, would it? I must confess that I hadn't expected to receive such quality at the prices you're charging, he added with a chuckle. He makes it himself. Feeling his eyebrows reach for his full salt and pepper airline, all for one regarded Dabby in wonder before observing the cafe owner. You made this? From scratch? He asked bewilderedly. May I ask where you trained? Satsuma High School in Tokyo, the bun wearer replied, his jaunty black chef's cap complete with paw prints, shifting a little as he inclined that very clever head through a mild shrug. I've made quite a few pies today for a special order, if you'd like to take one home with you. Oh, yes, I'd like that very much, he admitted. He was a little surprised, too, at how genuinely he meant it. Another mouthful eaten before he looked to the teenager, now lounging in the booth closest to the cafe's main entrance, those beautiful turquoise eyes casting around outside before checking his phone. Ah, so Tomura was on his way, then? Excellent. Of course, sir. I have apple, cherry, and banoffee pie available. Which would you prefer? Why, my dear Aizawa-kun, I believe I'll have one of each, please. With my deepest thanks. He smiled generously before continuing to enjoy the slice before him. It was gone too soon, wasn't it? Then watching the talented, precise, and obviously doting, somehow he didn't see that as a weakness in this man, make yet another exit. The country's so-called greatest threat and most wanted villain decided to scratch the itch of his curiosity. Knowledge was power, after all. Excuse me, young man? he asked when his pie was not but crumbs, Dobby's eyes looking towards him disinterestedly. Teenagers. I couldn't help but notice that you're also wearing an apron and cap, he furthered. You work here as well, I take it?
Yeah. Yes, that's right,
he replied.
Can I get you anything when my boss is busy?
Oh, no, thank you. He smiled congenially. I was only curious, let's say, about the history of this place, he allowed. You've not been open long, have you? He continued. And it's a family business, I take it?
We've been open for just over 2 months, going on for 3.
The dark-haired boy suddenly self-conscious. Ah, yes, you could see why his ward had taken to him. There was a certain sweetness to be exploited here, wasn't there?
He returned with an almost astonished look. Yeah, you could say it's a family business,
he furthered when the owner returned with 3 white-black paw print smattered boxes in hand, a roguish smile painting those handsome features and highlighting his charms considerably.
There's no could say about it as far as I'm concerned,
the Raven-Air beauty stated after depositing the admittedly cute and definitely hand-designed packages before him, those dark eyes shifting from the lightly blushing teen back to him, an artful brow rising a question.
If it's not too intrusive of me to ask, Mr.
Shigaraki, he supplied with another smile, that luscious silky ice cream now similarly gone. What a pity.
Shigaraki-san, have you recently returned to the area?
Oh, why, yes, I have, he grinned. I have family business of my own to tend to in town, since, unfortunately, my work takes me all over the world, from time to time, which means I can't be here with my nephew as often as I'd like. He allowed, his expression playing up a sadness he didn't feel. I'm what some circles might call a quirk specialist, you see, and, blinking when a gasp boomed out behind him, his cerulean eyes looking from the people he'd been talking to, who shared a knowing, teasing glance. All for one turned around to see a freckle-faced, emerald-haired young man sporting a "Hooray, I'm 7 today!" badge, his big doe eyes starry and filled with wonder. How decidedly cute! How easily corruptible!
Shigaraki-san,
the eatery owner, an exceptional baker besides, said warmly,
This is Midoriya Izuku.
He chuckled.
He has ambitions to become all kinds of things. However, you'll probably not find a young man more proficient in analyzing quirks than him.
The child, such a pleasant, affable, and quirkless little thing, had happily sat and chatted with him, or at him really, about his profession for a solid 10 minutes, his energetic form bringing him his handwritten notes, observations, and books brimming with ideas. Now that he thought about it, nurturing someone with this kind of talent was probably a very good idea, wasn't it? It'd be like having his own personal quirk sales assistant, wouldn't it? Useful indeed. My goodness, Midoriya-kun! He laughed when the boy finally took a breath. One of his friends, a lovely little brunette girl, who'd very quietly and politely reminded the enthusiastic, intelligent, and forward-thinking boy that the cats needed grooming. How domestic. Now standing next to him with a shy smile. What a marvelous young man you are, he praised. It isn't every day that I meet someone of your tender years so interested in analysis, he added whilst giving that unruly mop of emerald hair a gentle, familial pat. Do say hello to the cats for me, won't you? Yes, sir! Thank you, sir! He veritably chirped before scooping up his books and skipping off. Midoriya, huh? Very, very interesting.
Thank you for speaking with him, Shigaraki-san.
Aizawa Shouta offered quietly, his form diligently cleaning the table behind him whilst Dabi continued to keep watch, an annoyed sigh leaving him as he got up and walked quite briskly towards a video game setup.
He can get a little carried away at times,
he chuckled. Watching as he walked past him, more interesting still, the ageless man in disguise let out a well-meaning laugh that wasn't as fake as he'd thought it would be. It was my pleasure, he assured. Preparing young people for a better future is something very much at the heart of what I'm trying to achieve, he added before finishing his coffee with a pleased if slightly disappointed sigh. Perhaps it wouldn't hurt to have another, he... Ding, ding! Looking up, the handsome and more talented besides young man having already returned to the service bar, all for one very nearly expelled a deep raucous laugh.
Ah, Shouta-kun, good afternoon.
For who should have walked through the cafe's door but Yagito Shinori? His smile sincere, his shoulders relaxed, his tone overly informal, overly friendly.
Good afternoon yourself. Who in the world are you feeding all of my muffins to, anyway? You certainly order enough for a party every time, don't you?
Oh, Tomra.
He thought, ha 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 ha! Shouta-kun, do you really think that I'd share them, or any of your amazing pies, with anyone else other than yourself and maybe Sanai there?
So this is why you've set up camp here, you good boy, you excellent, diligent boy.
Where do you put it all?
Smothering his grin, the flash of power which had threatened to crackle all across his skin quickly reined in. Shigaraki licked his suddenly dry lips and tried to hide the predatory glint sparking in his borrowed eyes. All Might-sama, is that you? He called pleasantly, his mind's eye reveling in the sudden stiffening of those colossal shoulders as neon blue eyes snapped to his own, that fucking smile finally dying. My goodness, what a small world this is, he chuckled as he took in that stricken expression, those pulsing veins. Come join me, won't you? He offered in a lilting purr. It's been a while since we talked, wouldn't you say?